We're going to make our kitchen table. So the pieces of wood had enough of a cup in it to be a problem, and they wouldn't have fitted in our planer. So I had a go with the hand planer, gave up pretty quickly, and came up with this solution instead. The first problem was, how was I going to make it straight from front to back? And I've seen some jigs that you can get on the internet, and they're pretty big and they look like they take a long time to set up, make or store. And as I was looking around the workshop, I realised we had some soil pipes, and my workbench is pretty big, so laying those down the pieces of timber and then resting our kitchen worktop jig on top gave me a pretty nice flat and square surface to work on. Made a huge amount of sawdust. It left some ridges in the timber, which, although small, would be a right pain in the arse to get rid of with some sandpaper, so decided to have a go with the hand plane, and it didn't take too long. So the legs were a bit of a problem because you can either buy very expensive fittings of like £100 each and also very difficult to get hold of because the suppliers didn't provide them, or you can do 4 dominoes and twist them, as you see here, which means that the table shouldn't rotate around the legs, which it would do with a single fixing, and as long as there's enough glue, it should hold itself pretty well. I was worried a little bit that so many dominoes keeping each piece of timber together was going to be really hard to join. Sometimes they don't line up quite as well. But there's settings on the machine which means you can widen the holes and it clicked together quite nicely. Well, it eventually clicked together quite nicely. Because I really wanted to use the whole length of timber, there was going to be some cracks that were going to be left in the table. Now I could either cut the table shorter to get rid of these cracks, or I could fill them with epoxy and make them a little bit of a feature. So the thing with epoxy is it finds any tiny gap and runs through, and you'd think because it's so viscous that it would stick, but to prevent any of that dripping through onto the floor, we put some aluminium tape along any of the areas we were applying it to make sure that it stayed within the crack. And the reason I've used aluminium tape is because I think it'll be the easiest to scrape the epoxy off. If we use any normal masking tape, I think it might soak in. So the black powder is actually a glitter nail dye, which I was concerned would end up being a bit glittery, but because we sanded it, it ended up being a matte black, which was fine. It was about the only one we could get on Amazon Prime quickly enough, and I needed to get the table done because this was going to be our Christmas table, and what you can see is pretty much Christmas Eve, so we had to get what we had available. Now it looks like I'm pouring this on really thick, but if you keep watching you'll see it sink into the crack, and I had to keep applying this maybe 4 or 5 times because it filled up every gap inside, which is really great for strength, but doesn't mean you've got to keep an eye on it. This Osmo treatment that we use is a mixture of beeswax, linseed oil and some other really lovely natural ingredients, and it's such a nice thing to put on the timber because you can really see the grain and you know that it's natural as well. So there we go, that's the table done. We had Christmas dinner on it, table didn't collapse, so that's a winner.